something major is unfolding right now around XRP, and most people still don't realize how important this moment could be for the future of Ripple and its holders. Because behind the scenes, there are signals, movements, and decisions that are quietly shaping what could become one of the most defining phases for XRP in the financial world. And if you are holding XRP or even thinking about it, then understanding what is happening at this exact time is not just useful, but absolutely critical, because missing these developments could mean missing the bigger picture that institutions, analysts, and experienced investors are already watching very closely. Right now, the conversation around XRP is becoming more intense than it has been in a long time. And this is not just because of random market hype, but because there are real developments connected to Ripple that are starting to attract attention from both retail investors and large financial players. And when you look closely at the current situation, you begin to see that this is not just another normal phase in the crypto market cycle, but something that could have long term impact on how XRP is positioned globally. One of the most important things to understand is that XRP has always been different from many other cryptocurrencies because its main focus has been on solving real world financial problems, especially in cross border payments. And while many projects promise innovation, Ripple has consistently worked on building partnerships with banks and financial institutions, which means that whenever there is news related to Ripple, it often has deeper implications compared to typical crypto updates. And that is exactly why the current developments are being watched so carefully. At this moment, there is growing speculation and discussion about how XRP could benefit from increasing clarity in regulations, especially in major markets like the United States. And this matters a lot because regulatory uncertainty has been one of the biggest challenges for XRP in the past. And now that there are signs of progress, investors are starting to rethink the potential future of XRP in a more positive way. And this shift in sentiment is not happening randomly, but is being driven by specific events and signals that are slowly building confidence. Another key factor that is adding fuel to this situation is the behavior of large holders, often referred to as whales, who seem to be positioning themselves in a way that suggests they are expecting something significant. And while retail investors often react late to market movements, these large players usually act based on information, analysis, and long term strategies, which is why their activity is always closely monitored. And right now, their actions are raising questions about what might be coming next for XRP. At the same time, the broader crypto market is also playing a role in shaping XRP's current momentum, because when the overall market shows signs of strength or recovery, assets like XRP often gain additional attention. But what makes this situation unique is that XRP is not just following the market trend, it is also being driven by its own independent developments, which makes it even more important to analyze carefully rather than simply assuming it is moving with the rest of the crypto space. There is also increasing discussion about the possibility of XRP expanding its use cases beyond what people traditionally associate it with. And if Ripple continues to push forward with its technology and partnerships, then XRP could become more deeply integrated into financial systems than many people currently expect. And this is one of the reasons why long term holders are staying patient despite short term price fluctuations, because they are focused on the bigger vision rather than temporary movements. What makes this moment even more interesting is the combination of all these factors happening at the same time, because it is not just one piece of news or one event, but a series of developments that together create a situation where the potential for a major shift becomes much higher. And when you see regulatory progress, institutional interest, whale activity, and market momentum all aligning, it becomes clear that something important could be building beneath the surface. And this is exactly why understanding the current situation around XRP is so important, because while many people are still waiting for obvious signals, the real opportunities often begin to form before everything becomes clear to the public. And those who pay attention early are usually the ones who benefit the most from what comes next. As the situation continues to develop, one of the most important aspects to focus on is how Ripple is positioning itself in the global financial system, because this is where the real value of XRP begins to take shape beyond just price speculation. And if you look closely, you will notice that Ripple is not operating like a typical crypto project, but more like a financial technology company that is trying to integrate blockchain into existing systems rather than replace them completely, which gives it a very unique advantage in terms of adoption. Over time, Ripple has built relationships with banks, payment providers, and financial institutions across different regions. And while not every partnership directly uses XRP at this stage, the infrastructure that Ripple is creating still plays a major role in opening doors for XRP in the future. Because once systems are connected and tested, the transition to using XRP for liquidity becomes much easier. And this is why many analysts believe that the real impact of these partnerships may not be fully visible yet, but could become significant over time. Another major point that is starting to gain attention is the role of on demand liquidity, which is one of Ripple's key solutions. And this system uses XRP as a bridge currency to facilitate faster and cheaper cross border transactions. And in a world where traditional banking systems can take days to settle international payments, the ability to complete transactions in seconds is not just an improvement, but a complete shift in efficiency. And this is exactly the kind of practical use case that gives XRP a strong foundation compared to many other digital assets that rely mostly on hype or speculation. At the same time, there is increasing awareness about how important speed, cost, and scalability are becoming in global finance, especially as more countries explore digital currencies and modern payment systems. And in this environment, solutions like Ripple's are starting to look more relevant than ever because they are already built with these challenges in mind. And XRP plays a central role in making the system work smoothly, which is why any progress made by Ripple often reflects positively on XRP's long term outlook. There is also a growing conversation about how XRP could fit into the broader ecosystem of digital assets, especially as competition increases among different blockchain projects. And while some cryptocurrencies focus on decentralized finance or smart contracts, XRP's focus on payments and liquidity gives it a specific niche. And this specialization could actually work in its favor, because instead of trying to do everything, XRP is focused on doing one thing extremely well. And in the world of finance, efficiency and reliability are often more important than complexity. Another interesting development is how financial institutions are slowly becoming more open to blockchain based solutions. And while adoption is still gradual, the shift in mindset is becoming more noticeable, because banks and payment companies are starting to realize that ignoring blockchain technology is no longer a practical option. And this change in attitude creates an environment where Ripple's solutions can gain more traction, especially since they are designed to work within existing regulatory frameworks rather than against them. At the same time, the importance of trust and compliance cannot be ignored, because large financial institutions require systems that meet strict standards. And this is another area where Ripple has been focusing heavily, ensuring that its technology aligns with legal and regulatory requirements. And this approach may not generate as much excitement as rapid innovation, but it builds a stronger foundation for long term adoption, which ultimately benefits XRP as well. When you combine all these factors, it becomes clear that the current momentum around XRP is not just based on speculation, but on a growing recognition of its practical value. And while short term price movements may continue to fluctuate, the underlying developments suggest that something much bigger could be taking shape. And for those who are paying attention, this phase could be one of the most important periods in understanding where XRP might be heading in the future. As things continue to unfold, one of the most critical areas that cannot be ignored anymore is the regulatory environment surrounding XRP. Because for a long time, uncertainty in regulation has been one of the biggest reasons why XRP has not been able to fully reach its potential. And now that there are visible signs of progress, the entire outlook around XRP is slowly beginning to shift in a way that could have long term consequences for both investors and the broader crypto industry. The legal situation involving Ripple has played a major role in shaping public perception, especially during the past few years. And while many investors remained cautious during that time, the gradual movement toward clarity is now changing how XRP is being viewed, not just by retail investors, but also by institutions that were previously hesitant to get involved due to compliance risks. And this shift is extremely important because institutional participation often brings stability and long term growth rather than short term volatility. One of the key things happening right now is that regulators and policymakers are starting to better understand how different cryptocurrencies function. And instead of applying a one size fits all approach, there is growing discussion about creating more specific frameworks for different types of digital assets. And this is where XRP could benefit significantly because its use case as a bridge currency for payments sets it apart from many other tokens that are often categorized differently. And clearer classification could remove a lot of the confusion that has surrounded XRP for years. At the same time, there is increasing global competition when it comes to blockchain innovation, with different countries trying to position themselves as leaders in financial technology. And in this environment, having a project like Ripple that is already working with institutions gives XRP an advantage because governments and regulators are more likely to support solutions that can integrate into existing systems without causing disruption. And this is exactly the approach that Ripple has been following from the beginning. Another important factor to consider is how market sentiment changes when uncertainty begins to fade. Because in financial markets, confidence plays a huge role in determining price movements and long term adoption. And when investors feel that risks are decreasing, they are more willing to allocate capital. And this can create a ripple effect where increased demand leads to greater visibility, which then attracts even more participants into the ecosystem. And this cycle can significantly accelerate growth if it continues in a positive direction. There is also a noticeable increase in discussions among analysts and experts who are now revisiting XRP's long term potential, especially in light of these regulatory developments. And while opinions may still vary, the fact that XRP is being taken seriously again is a strong indicator that the narrative is changing because in the past, uncertainty often pushed XRP out of major conversations, but now it is slowly coming back into focus as a project with real world applications. At the same time, it is important to understand that regulatory clarity does not mean instant success or immediate price surges because markets take time to adjust, and even positive developments can be followed by periods of consolidation or slow growth. But what matters more is the foundation being built during this time, because once the uncertainty is removed, the path becomes clearer for long term adoption. And this is what experienced investors often look for rather than short term excitement. What makes this phase particularly important is that it represents a transition period where XRP is moving from uncertainty toward potential acceptance. And while the process may still take time, the direction is becoming more defined. And for those who are observing closely, this is not just another moment in the market, but a stage where the future positioning of XRP is being shaped in real time. And understanding this shift could be crucial in making informed decisions moving forward. As the momentum around XRP continues to build, another important dimension that is starting to gain attention is the behavior of the market itself, especially when it comes to patterns, timing, and how different types of investors are reacting to the current situation. Because understanding market behavior is often the key to seeing what might happen next rather than just reacting to what has already happened. One of the most noticeable things right now is that XRP is entering a phase where accumulation appears to be taking place. And this is usually a period where large investors quietly build their positions without creating too much attention in the market. And while price movements during this phase may seem slow or even frustrating for some holders, experienced investors understand that accumulation phases often come before significant moves because once enough positions are built, the market can shift direction much more quickly. At the same time, there is a clear difference between how short term traders and long term holders are approaching XRP at this stage because traders often focus on small price movements and quick profits, while long term holders are more interested in the bigger picture, including adoption, partnerships, and regulatory clarity. And this difference in mindset can create mixed signals in the market where short term volatility exists alongside long term confidence, making it important to separate noise from meaningful trends. Another factor that is influencing the current situation is the role of overall market cycles because the cryptocurrency market tends to move in phases that are often influenced by factors such as liquidity, investor sentiment, and macroeconomic conditions. And when you look at XRP within this broader context, it becomes clear that its movement is not happening in isolation, but at the same time, XRP has its own unique drivers that can sometimes cause it to behave differently from other assets. There is also increasing attention being given to technical levels, which are price points where the market tends to react strongly. And while technical analysis does not guarantee outcomes, it does provide insight into how traders are positioning themselves. And right now, there are key levels that many analysts are watching closely because breaking above or below these levels could signal the next major move for XRP. And this is why the current phase is being observed so carefully by both traders and investors. At the same time, social sentiment is playing a growing role in shaping how XRP is perceived. Because in today's digital environment, discussions on social platforms can quickly influence market behavior. And when positive sentiment starts to build, it can attract more attention, which then feeds back into the market, creating a cycle of increasing interest. And while this does not replace fundamentals, it can amplify existing trends and accelerate movements when combined with real developments. Another important element to consider is patience, because one of the biggest challenges for many investors is staying committed during periods where nothing seems to be happening. And this is often when emotional decisions are made. But in reality, these quieter phases are where the groundwork is laid for future movements. And those who understand this are more likely to remain focused on long term goals rather than being influenced by short term fluctuations. When you bring all these elements together, including accumulation, market cycles, technical levels, and investor behavior, it becomes clear that XRP is currently in a stage where multiple forces are interacting at the same time. And while the exact outcome cannot be predicted with certainty, the setup itself suggests that the next phase could be very important because markets tend to move strongly after periods of consolidation, especially when supported by fundamental developments. And this is why the current moment should not be underestimated, because while it may not appear dramatic on the surface, the underlying structure is changing and those changes often become visible only after the move has already begun, which is why staying aware and informed during this phase could make a significant difference in understanding what comes next for XRP. As everything comes together, it becomes clear that XRP is currently standing at a very important point where multiple factors are aligning at the same time. And this combination is what makes the current situation so significant, because it is not just about price movement or short term excitement, but about the bigger picture that is slowly forming around Ripple and its long term role in the financial world. When you look at everything that has been discussed, including regulatory progress, institutional interest, real world utility, and market behavior, you start to see a pattern where XRP is moving from uncertainty toward a more stable and defined position. And while this transition may not happen overnight, the direction itself is becoming clearer, which is often the most important factor for long term investors who are focused on where things are heading rather than where they are right now. At the same time, it is important to understand that opportunities in markets like this often come with challenges, because even when the fundamentals are strong, there can still be periods of volatility, unexpected corrections, and shifts in sentiment. And this is why having a balanced perspective is so important, because reacting emotionally to short term changes can often lead to decisions that do not align with long term goals, especially in a space that moves as quickly as the cryptocurrency market. Another key point to keep in mind is that the future of XRP will not depend on a single event or announcement, but rather on the continued progress of multiple factors working together over time, including adoption by financial institutions, improvements in technology, and the overall acceptance of blockchain solutions in global finance. And this is why patience and awareness are often more valuable than trying to predict exact price movements, because the real growth tends to happen gradually before it becomes visible to everyone. There is also a growing realization among investors that projects with real world use cases tend to have a stronger foundation compared to those driven purely by hype. And this is where XRP continues to stand out, because its focus on payments and liquidity gives it a clear purpose. And as the financial system continues to evolve, solutions that improve efficiency and reduce costs are likely to gain more attention, which could further strengthen XRP's position over time. At the same time, staying informed is becoming more important than ever, because the pace of change in the crypto space is extremely fast, and new developments can quickly influence the direction of the market. And this is why following reliable information, understanding the fundamentals, and avoiding unnecessary noise can make a big difference in how effectively someone navigates this space, especially during periods where important changes are taking place. As we move forward, the key takeaway is not just about what XRP is doing today, but about what it is building toward in the future, because the current phase appears to be part of a larger process that could define its role in the global financial system. And while no outcome is guaranteed, the combination of factors currently in play suggests that XRP is entering a period that deserves close attention from anyone interested in the long term potential of digital assets. And finally, it is important to remember that this content is for informational and educational purposes only, and should not be considered financial advice, because the cryptocurrency market involves risk, and every investment decision should be made based on your own research and understanding. And if you find this kind of breakdown helpful and want to stay updated with the latest developments around XRP in the crypto market, then make sure to subscribe and stay connected for more clear and simple updates in the future.